This is a retrofit information, support and expertise event, which is fully funded by the Department of Energy Security and Net Zero, delivered by Turner & Townsend. Thank you for joining. I'll now hand over to Julian.
Hi everyone, thanks Ivani. Welcome to this RISE Masterclass. So this is the RISE Masterclass on creating successful supply chains. The agenda for today, these are the sort of broad subjects that we're going to be covering. So basically this masterclass is aimed at prospective applicants for retrofit schemes who want to understand how to create successful supply chains, which is an important aspect of your SHDF project and has a big impact on successful delivery. So heading, every home is unique. Basically, a block of dwellings might appear to have identical buildings, identical dwellings within them, but the analysis of their energy use, individual energy use, will show how different their household energy consumption is. Obviously, if you wanted to compare a retired couple to a young family or to a young professional couple, you can then understand almost straight away how very different the energy use of those different occupants would be, even within exactly the same flat or apartment or house. If we're looking to bring together a supply chain that can deal with retrofit at scale and at speed, then we need to be approaching the challenge from a mass customization perspective. And this really kind of encompasses the ability to have the same but individualized approaches to different retrofit needs. So we need to understand technically what is required. We also need the processes to allow us to arrive at a technical design, put a supply chain in place, and deliver the project successfully and be signed off by several people. And it's to be all done very quickly. All parties in this supply chain should be clear about their responsibilities within that scope of work. So just understanding the kind of compliance elements of a retrofit project, probably well known to many of you, but just sort of recapping about what the regulations are that are in place. All work that gets done on existing buildings, whether it's an energy retrofit or an extension or loft conversion or anything else, our supply chain must be capable of doing work to UK building regulations, planning regulations, and making sure that the supply chain is working in a safe way, not only to protect its own staff, but also those living and operating around the building. On the regulatory side, there are mechanisms to allow the design and the installation to be checked by local authorities or a private provider of building control. But also there's another mechanism that allows a contractor, if it works within a competent person scheme, to sign off on their own work. The scheme will check a percentage of that work for compliance. In terms of obviously health and safety, there's the construction design and management requirements, CDM requirements, the client, contractor and subcontractor roles, wealth and various other surveys like asbestos, planning, etc. So continuing understanding of compliance, we've obviously pretty much all heard of PAS 2035 and for the supply chain PAS 2030, which is for the installers, a kind of certification of competence. PAS 2035 is more about the kind of methodology for delivering retrofit, and the project manager of that is the retrofit coordinator. But PAS is, as I've just said, split into two parts: the requirements for the installer and PAS 2035, which is the framework in effect that sets out the requirements for retrofit from start to finish. SHDF guidance specifies that PAS 2035 will apply, and it sets out some of the additional technical standards that go over and above UK building regulations, in particular Building Regs Part F, which is the ventilation regulation, where it asks retrofit designers and the contractor to aim for close to ventilation performance required for new build properties. Obviously, with retrofit, when we're reducing draft and maybe applying external wall insulation and new windows to a property, possibly putting new loft insulation in with some kind of specific ventilation for the loft area, and maybe under floor insulation, then we are tightening up the envelope of that building considerably and reducing any background uncontrolled ventilation. So we really do need to make sure that we have maintained indoor air quality and reduce the risk of mold and damp build-up by making sure that there is adequate ventilation provided, building the team. So basically, good communication within your team is absolutely paramount, involving the supply chain very early on, including contractors and designers, explaining about the milestones for when things have to be achieved, lines of communication, roles and responsibilities, all this being clearly communicated to all those concerned, all the stakeholders and the important partners in delivery of this retrofit project need to be fully up to speed and fully aware of their part in this. And this also needs to be covered in a sort of main kickoff meeting with the team. A detailed understanding of all the key stages and who is involved in which pieces of work is critical. This will help avoid delays and confusion later in the project. There will also be some elements of a job which mean we have to react to issues as they arise. So having an element of built-in flexibility within contract terms will allow for unexpected scope changes to be dealt with straight away, i.e. rot or damp discovered under a floor, which obviously would need to be addressed before we start doing any other works, and likely trapping those problems in, which could accelerate the damage caused and present significant risk to buildings and the occupants. Supervision, in particular of contractors who are new to retrofit, is very important. So maybe some technical training might be required, and supplier capacity is very important, ensuring that the local supply chain have the right numbers of people available to be able to complete works within the timescales required. Quite often, contractors will be, planning jobs, lots of different jobs with lots of different clients in a busy week, potentially. And so actually securing their presence on site when work is available to be done will go a long way to avoiding delays, especially with work which has government funding and has all this kind of reporting schedules aligned with it. So under those three headings, we're kind of thinking about the type of qualities that we're looking for within a team. In terms of attitude, it's important to work with contractors who are open-minded and willing to learn and can take sometimes maybe negative feedback appropriately in order to improve the way work is being delivered, the way the relationship with the client and the dwelling occupant is being delivered. And this can go a long way to getting work done at pace and to a high quality, and the eventual kind of feedback, I think, as well. It's very positive to be able to take maybe some negative feedback on board and actually change appropriately in order to correct something which might be seen as inappropriate for that particular situation. And if the supply chain know that there is quite a big opportunity in terms of long-term involvement, then that can be obviously a very good incentive as well. Thinking about this at the procurement stage, with options for extensions and long-term partnerships could, if successful, could be quite a attractive incentive. If you think about pricing, if we're doing a large number of properties, we would need a pricing structure. Obviously, maybe for different archetypes, could be one way of doing it. If you're doing quite a number of properties for, different types of dwellings, different types of, construction of houses and different requirements in terms of the retrofit, combined retrofit measures being installed in those different units, then you would definitely need to be able to get a good breakdown of that pricing structure. But it is important to have flexibility built into that, as I said, when unexpected issues arise and you do need to be able to carry out maybe some quite significant repairs before you do any retrofit work. So making sure everyone is clear about their scope of work is also really important, so that people don't feel that something is not their responsibility. You need to be able to clearly go through this so that everybody understands what's in their scope of work. The scale of the need. So nationally, obviously people do talk about, 26 million homes retrofitted by 2050. Basically the scale, whatever number you're looking at, is pretty enormous. And in order to deliver this amount of retrofit works in the time, basically we're going to have to increase the number of a dedicated workforce to tackle this very, very significantly. I won't really go through the numbers in this chart, but basically you're looking at the increase from where we are now of a very, very significant number of extra people to deliver the work required in the time. So yeah, in terms of the needs, these large scale projects do require skilled contractors, people who really understand the different measures and systems that are being installed by systems, very particular details being specified by the retrofit designer and being checked by a retrofit coordinator to make sure that they're being done to the right degree of quality and finish, and being done according to the specific system manufacturer's requirements too. In terms of numbers, by 2035, we've got an additional 260,000 roles in retrofit are required to meet the increasing demand. And I think with the new government, the ambition is going to be very much to kind of accelerate the scale of retrofit. In terms of the requirement to do that, obviously the supply chain has got to be in place to be able to deliver this work. So the two have got to go hand in hand. Basically, the funding for the actual to encourage local authorities and social landlords and the private sector too to deliver work, all of which will, if it's got any kind of funding, whether it's private sector funding, personal loans or anything like that, it's likely to require, some sort of certification for the installers. Whether it requires full PAS for the private sector, I don't know. It could be something that lenders will stipulate because they see this as the lowest risk in terms of, if you've got a mortgage lender putting money into a private property, then they would obviously want to protect the value of that property as much as possible. So something like the adoption of PAS, although it's seen as potentially quite an expensive process if you're only doing one or two measures, but obviously in terms of the long-term lifetime of the property and doing retrofit measures in the right order to the right quality, etc., you do have that medium-term improvement plan, which is part of the PAS 2035. So in terms of government funding to support, we've obviously had a few rounds of HUG and SHDF so far. But in terms of training, we've had government support have allocated 8.8 million to train up to 8,000 people, and the Home Decarbonisation Skills Training Competition, which is offering 9,000 training courses with more government funding. Obviously, in terms of the new government, I imagine these numbers will probably be bolstered to try and drive more ambitious targets, but we'll have to wait and see how that pans out. As I said before, there's an enormous number of people required to join the industry in order to hit the net zero targets for the UK. And this graph represents the number of additional full-time specialist skills required each year up to 2050 to carry out retrofit works. We set supply chains in an open-minded, flexible and collaborative way. It will offer the best chance of attracting the necessary numbers into the retrofit sector. So the role of social landlords, it's important to keep open discussions with the market to prepare them for your needs, and then you can form strategic partnerships with further education colleges, large contractors and local authorities. A great example of this is the Retrofit Skills Hub. Funding came from Greater Manchester Combined Authority. They awarded £1.1 million of funding to the Low Carbon Academy to provide training on retrofit skills for over 1,000 people and to prepare the area for up-and-coming skills requirement. The partnership was formed between the Low Carbon Academy, which is part of Northwest Skills Academy, Registered providers can kickstart this type of initiative through partnerships in their local areas. Another way registered providers can embed social value is through the contract. Embedding hiring from representative cohorts into contracts immediately helps to improve equal opportunities, and RPs should complete some contextual analysis of their area to understand which groups are in the highest need of opportunities and write their contracts to reflect this. Social value quotas, a case study is with Hammersmith and Fulham, where they had contracts of £100,000 plus. So they would include a minimum of 10% social value element and providing a social value officer and a social value delivery group. So they're seeing this impact in the wider social value context, which I think actually it chimes very well with what Retrofit is all about, improving housing and the impacts that has on occupants, on health, on reduced costs in terms of energy expenditure and bills, and the knock-on effects that improved housing can have in terms of education and employment, health, all sorts of other things that can be very positively impacted with improved housing. SME contract protection is absolutely essential. Requiring quotas for SME work is one element, such as a percentage of work to be subcontracted to SMEs. Contract to stipulate protection of SMEs via payment terms. Obviously, SMEs don't have the deep pockets that maybe tier ones do in terms of longer payment terms. So you can stipulate within contracts that SMEs need to have payment within shorter terms, and the conditions and roles and responsibilities also don't penalise the small or maybe even micro businesses that some of the SME installers are running. If there isn't any contract protection for SMEs, then larger contractors do hold all the power, and this can result in bankruptcy for SMEs or lack of SME uptake in works because they're just too worried of the risks that might be entailed with this kind of contract, unless they can see that their needs are being met through basically terms within the contract. Social value quotas can help to protect public funding for the public good and can be amended to best fit the needs of your area. And this, of course, applies more explicitly to local authorities, but housing associations can set their own quotas or discuss them with local councillors or government officials. Hiring from representative cohorts, as I mentioned earlier, so workforce can be ethically representative of the local community. And it's important to remember that social housing landlords do have the power to embed social value into their projects and shape the retrofit skills market. This is a quick look at the target groups potentially for retrofit careers. By targeting these groups, key change makers can ensure a wide range of people are attracted to the skills market. Most of you joining this call will probably have some power to influence uptake in this market and to make it as diverse as possible. So in terms of social value element, being able to overcome barriers, looking at some of the bullet points there, accessing local jobs for local workers, reskilling and upskilling of the existing workforce, inclusion of underrepresented groups, etc. In terms of equal opportunities, including a more fair mix of genders, increasing inclusivity within Retrofit and promoting ethnic diversity. These are all sort of elements of these social value, which I think the contracts really do need to, the potential applicants can really help promote some of these inclusion elements. So in terms of ambition, it's important that local people are able to deliver some of this work, warmer, affordable, healthy homes within their own communities, and at the same time developing long-term viable careers. Two key barriers which need to be overcome are economic inequality and equal opportunities. And to reach this end goal, the industry really must work to help overcome these barriers. In terms of the RISE resources, that's the end of our presentation. There are more RISE resources. The riseretrofit.org website there. There are plenty of other resources available on there for you to look at, recordings of different masterclasses, some different kind of round table sessions and transcripts from different sessions that are being run, covering all sorts of different aspects of retrofit. And that's it for this presentation.